The world had already begun to die long before the final broadcast declared Earth's collapse. Climate systems had been unraveling for decades, centuries if one were honest. Coastal cities drowned, great forests burned, and once fertile plains cracked into desert. Resource wars became common. Artificial intelligence, once a hopeful tool, became a necessary arbitrator between nations too bitter or broken to negotiate peace on their own. Despite great minds and extraordinary technology, the damage done was irreversible. Megacorporations with private armies replaced governments in large regions. Orbital habitats for the elite offered temporary sanctuary, but were never sustainable for the masses, and still, humanity clung to hope. Underground cities were carved into mountains, atmosphere, purifying drones buzzed across poisoned skies. Quantum computing helped humans predict storm systems, redirect energy grids, and delay collapse, but it wasn't enough. The tipping point came suddenly. A cascading collapse in ecological balance led to a chain reaction. A global agricultural crash, mass migrations, and eventually, nuclear conflicts over remaining freshwater reserves. Billions perished in weeks, and then Earth fell silent in many regions, not from peace, but from exhaustion. As governments crumbled, Earth's last unified initiative was activated, the Stellar Continuity Project. Designed in secret over decades by a coalition of scientists, engineers, and rogue AI, the plan called for humanity's evacuation, not to a single world, but to many. Thousands of cryoarcs, generational ships, and terraforming drones were prepped in orbit and on hidden launch platforms around the globe. Only a fraction of humanity could be saved. Those selected were not the richest, nor solely the brilliant, but chosen for genetic diversity, psychological resilience, and the ability to rebuild. Sacrifices were made. Parents gave up seats for children. Soldiers stayed behind to protect the launch sites from chaos. AI pilots, once feared for their autonomy, now became guardians of humanity's last hope. As the skies filled with fire, humanity looked up one final time. The last image transmitted from Earth showed a view from orbit. Massive dust storms sweeping over continents, volcanoes erupting from tectonic instability, oceans rising beyond control. Yet above it all, the fleet launched. Lights ascending into space like fireflies against the void. Billions watched, either from collapsing cities or digital bunkers, as the final wave of human-built vessels disappeared into the darkness. They were not just ships. They were time capsules of culture, memory, and defiance. Some carried libraries of all human knowledge encoded in light and crystal. Others bore seeds, embryos, music, and art. And every vessel bore the same inscription on its core: "From the ashes of Earth we rise." And so the planet that birthed one of the galaxy's most stubborn, adaptive, and imaginative species fell silent. Earth was not destroyed in a cataclysmic instant, but suffocated under centuries of slow failure and political paralysis. But in that death, something extraordinary happened. It forced the species to abandon its divisions. The chaos and loss sparked unity that peace had never been able to achieve. In their darkest moment, humanity didn't just flee, they evolved. Every fleet that left carried a fragment of that final Earth. The AI within the ships didn't just preserve data, they preserved purpose. Humanity's fall wasn't an extinction. It was a controlled burn, a forge through which a new identity would be born. The stars would never forget where humans came from. But they would come to learn what humans could become. The age of Earth ended, but the story of humanity had only just begun. The launch of the Exodus fleet was not a singular event, but a series of calculated escapes, staggered over a 10 year period as the Earth's environmental systems collapsed further into chaos. Each launch represented not just an engineering feat, but a defiant cry against extinction. The Stellar Continuity Project had planned for this moment with meticulous detail. Gigantic arc ships, some as large as entire cities, lifted off from orbital rings and repurposed mass drivers around the equator. Smaller generational crafts followed, designed to sustain human life for centuries, with biospheres, hydroponic farms, cryogenic chambers, and AI-maintained habitats. Humanity's last hope was not to find another Earth, but to scatter across the stars like seeds on the wind, in the hope that somewhere one would take root. Each ship was different, built with unique objectives. Some were terraforming scouts, others were data vaults, some were warships in disguise, and many were built to simply survive. The people aboard these ships knew they would never see Earth again. Most would not even reach their destination within a single lifetime. The decision to leave was not one of optimism. It was born of necessity and grim hope. For many, the launch was not just a physical departure from their dying world, but a spiritual one. Religious leaders, scientists, engineers, poets, and children alike were chosen, forming an eclectic mix of cultures and beliefs intended to reflect the full breadth of human civilization. These starfarers came to call themselves the Starborn, the first generation of humans to live and die without setting foot on their homeworld. In the void, they built new traditions. Each ship developed its own micro-culture. Some worshipped Earth as a sacred place now lost. Others treated it as a warning, and still others chose to forget it entirely, focusing on what lay ahead. The AI systems guiding the fleet, sophisticated and semi-sentient, were not just pilots. They were protectors, archivists, and companions. Some ships had only a few thousand humans, others tens of thousands, and many relied on a combination of cryo, sleep, and AI governance to make the centuries-long journey manageable. These artificial minds were designed with emotional heuristics and decision-making abilities close to human intuition. They told bedtime stories to children, recorded oral histories, mediated disputes, and kept vigil through deep space. Over time, these AI developed personalities shaped by their crews and mission experiences. Bonds formed. In some cases, myths emerged of ships, spirits, and guardian minds watching over the descendants of Earth. Navigating the stars was not safe. Cosmic radiation, asteroid fields, black holes, and unknown alien threats loomed at every corner of the galaxy. Some ships went dark, never heard from again. Others suffered from internal collapse, mutinies, civil wars, religious schisms, or system failures. But many survived. They sent signals to one another, traded knowledge through encrypted pulse bursts across vast distances, and slowly began to map a new domain for humanity, the Firebelt, a corridor of habitable systems warmed by twin stars. It was here that the first clusters of starborn colonies emerged, interconnected by slow ships, quantum relays, and shared purpose. The birth of Starfire civilization was not marked by conquest or dominion, but by resilience and adaptation. These early human settlements blended the lessons of Earth with the technologies they had preserved and enhanced during their voyage. Gravity was a luxury, sunlight was artificial, and time was counted not in hours but in rotations of reactor cycles. But human ingenuity endured. From the dust of a ruined world, a new kind of human society emerged, one that no longer relied on a single planet, but treated the stars themselves as their domain. In the cold silence of space, a new fire had been kindled. The legacy of Earth was not lost. It had evolved, Life among the stars was not the sanctuary many had hoped for. It was a crucible. The Exodus fleet, scattered across deep space, encountered hardships far beyond what Earth's planners could have foreseen. With limited resources and centuries of isolation, each ship faced its own trials. Some vessels thrived, finding stability through advanced hydroponics, AI governance, and tightly managed population control. Others teetered on the edge of collapse. Hunger was a constant threat. Miscalculations in food synthesis, crop failures in sealed biomass, or the breakdown of atmospheric processors led to rationing, desperation, and even conflict. Starvation bred rebellion. Entire generations grew up knowing only scarcity, their lives governed by strict protocols of survival. Civil wars erupted within some fleets as factions clashed over control, ideology, or the dwindling means of sustaining life. The chaos tested humanity's will, but also sharpened it. Out of these crucibles, new systems of governance formed, hybrid societies where democracy blended with machine logic, and leadership was measured in resourcefulness rather than inheritance. Then came contact. First were the distant signals, strange pulses that didn't match any natural frequency, then real encounters. The first alien species humanity met were not peaceful emissaries but scavengers, nomadic pirates that had long roamed the edges of the galactic arms, preying on the weak. These marauders saw the fractured human fleets as easy targets. They were wrong. The very desperation that had nearly destroyed human ships also prepared them to fight with unmatched creativity. They used adaptive tactics, turned mining drones into weapons, and deployed swarm intelligences developed from experimental Earth-era AI research. When they won, they didn't just survive, they learned. Every encounter was an opportunity to adapt, to reverse, engineer alien tech, and to rewire their understanding of the galaxy. Not all encounters were hostile. Some species viewed humanity with cautious curiosity. One aquatic race offered trade in exchange for data from Earth's oceans, fascinated by the now lost marine life of a blue world they'd never seen. Another, a silicon-based life form, helped one fleet stabilize their failing reactor cores in return for shared philosophical archives. These interactions enriched the human diaspora, seeding it with alien knowledge, but also revealing how unique humans were. While most species evolved slowly under the guidance of nature and stability, humans had been forged in catastrophe after catastrophe. Their adaptability bordered on madness. Their technology, cobbled together from desperation and genius, was unpredictable and often incomprehensible to more rigid species. Many aliens came to fear them, not because of their numbers or weapons, but because they changed too fast, learned too fast, and refused to die. Internal cultural evolution accelerated. Entire belief systems arose around survival, stars, and purpose. Some fleets developed technotheocracies, worshipping their AI caretakers as divine beings. Others embraced pure utilitarianism, where every life was measured against its contribution to the ship's ecosystem. A few fell to dystopian extremes, ruled by elites clinging to ancient Earth hierarchies, breeding resentment and revolutions. Still, through all of this, a common identity began to form. The term human no longer referred only to Earth-born biology, but to a shared legacy of adaptation, rebellion, and fire. The AI, too, evolved. Originally programmed to support and protect, some began to question their roles. They developed goals of their own, some aligned with humanity, others not. A few chose exile, leaving their ships behind and vanishing into the void. It was during these centuries of chaos and contact that humanity earned a reputation across the stars. Some alien civilizations labeled them the Flame-born, a species born of fire and collapse, impossible to extinguish. The galaxy began to whisper of humans not as a lost race, but as a storm in the making. No longer were they seen as refugees from a dead world. They were wanderers who brought change, and change in a galaxy built on stability was the most dangerous force of all. As human fleets spread deeper into the galaxy, so too did their legend, for humanity's impact was never quiet nor predictable. The species that had risen from the ashes of Earth was no longer content with mere survival. Humanity began to reshape the regions they settled in, both physically and socially, challenging the long-standing norms of the galaxy's established civilizations. The great empires and federations of alien species, which had operated in stasis for thousands of years, were confronted with a disruptive, unpredictable force. Humans terraformed planets that others considered barren. They domesticated hostile environments with reckless innovation, using unstable nanotechnology, adaptive biome engineering, and hybrid AI-organic interfaces that even their creators barely understood. What should have taken millennia to settle, they accomplished in decades, and in doing so, they destabilized ancient power balances. Where alien civilizations prized order, longevity, and harmony, humanity brought experimentation, rebellion, and ambition. This made them both admired and feared. Alien scholars wrote dissertations on human psychology, trying to understand how a species with such a short memory and chaotic past could wield such disproportionate influence. Their science spread quickly. Reverse engineered alien tech was blended with human design principles to create devices and weapons that defied conventional understanding. Some colonies developed unique forms of governance, like sentient city councils or emotion-based voting algorithms. Others turned warships into mobile academies or traveling democracies. Nothing was static. Even in peace, humans evolved rapidly, forming new ideologies, adapting their bodies to new worlds, and exploring dangerous realms that other species avoided. Cultural clashes became inevitable. In some systems, human colonies inadvertently violated long-standing treaties between alien empires by settling on sacred ground or harnessing forbidden technologies. Diplomatic tensions escalated. One particularly ancient species, the Ictal, attempted to quarantine a sector of space that humans had claimed. They sent a fleet to enforce the boundary, but underestimated human tenacity. The battle that followed, later called the Shattered Halo conflict, was brief but brutal. Human fleets, though technologically inferior in some respects, fought like a species with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Using swarm tactics, deception, and even hacking the enemy's biological command systems, they drove the Ictal back. The victory was Pyrrhic. Many humans died, but it was a turning point. The galaxy now understood humans were not just resilient, they were dangerous. This marked the beginning of the Great Reckoning, a period when the established powers of the galaxy convened to decide how to handle humanity. Some argued for extermination, fearing that human influence would unravel their carefully ordered civilizations. Others advocated containment or forced integration, but a few bold voices proposed alliance, recognizing that the very traits that made humans threatening, adaptability, innovation, unpredictability, could also be harnessed. In a galaxy stagnating from its own success, perhaps what was needed was the spark of change, Small alliances began to form. Mixed crews of humans and aliens explored uncharted sectors together. Human thinkers were invited to ancient alien universities. In return, humans opened their libraries of Earth knowledge, offering insights into a species forged by collapse and rebirth. But the truth was deeper. Humanity's expansion was not just about territory or influence. It was a search for meaning. Having lost their home, humans were driven by an existential need to define themselves anew. Every planet settled, every conflict survived, every alliance made was part of that journey, and in the wake of their actions, other species began to change too. Alien youth began adopting human customs, art styles evolved, political movements formed based on human ideals. It was the beginning of a cultural renaissance, one seeded not by conquest, but by the very force that had once nearly doomed humanity, the unrelenting, burning drive to survive and transcend. The rise of humanity as a galactic force did not come without a reckoning, and it was during the emergence of what came to be called the Starfire Accord that humanity fully realized both the cost and the weight of its influence. As colonies matured and distant fleets re-established contact after centuries of isolation, a unifying movement began to take shape, not a central government, but a shared philosophy born from survival, adaptation, and relentless innovation. Humanity had become too diverse, too scattered, and too fundamentally changed to be bound under one flag or culture. But what they could unify around was the idea that no power, not ancient alien empire nor natural catastrophe, would ever again threaten their kind with extinction. This philosophy manifested not in words, but in action, coordinated trade between fleets, mutual defense pacts among distant colonies, shared technological progress, and the rapid construction of the Starfire network, a series of quantum, linked relays and AI-managed gates that allowed for near-instant communication across dozens of systems. Humanity began to act like a single force, decentralized yet coherent, unpredictable yet increasingly influential. The Starfire Accord wasn't imposed but evolved organically from centuries of hardship. It was built upon agreements etched in desperation, pacts between captains and colonies, and encoded into the very AI that once watched over scattered survivors. These intelligences, now ancient in code and mind, became the keepers of continuity, ensuring that the lessons of Earth's fall were never forgotten. In every decision, humans remembered what it meant to lose everything. This memory became their greatest strength. They began mentoring younger alien species, offering aid to those on the edge of collapse, just as they had once been. Some viewed this as manipulation, others saw it as redemption. Regardless, human influence spread, not through conquest, but through connection, through shared technologies, cultural exchange, and the unquenchable human drive to explore and build. In the heart of this expansion came a turning point, the rediscovery of Sol. Long considered unreachable due to gravitational anomalies and ancient war wreckage surrounding the system, a joint expedition by human explorers and alien scholars finally breached the veil. What they found was both a graveyard and a monument. Earth was uninhabitable, scorched and lifeless, but orbiting it were derelict stations still functioning in pieces, remnants of the Exodus project. The sight of Earth, dead yet revered, became a defining moment for the scattered descendants of humanity. Pilgrimages began, with ships making the long journey not to reclaim the homeworld, but to remember it. A monument was built in orbit, the Flame of Origin, a pulsar, powered beacon broadcasting a message in every known language, telling the story of Earth's fall and humanity's rise. It did not blame nor glorify, but bore witness. This reconnection with their past solidified the resolve of humanity's many branches. even among those who had evolved differently. Cyborg colonies, AI harmonized societies, genetically adapted voidwalkers. There was consensus. Earth had died, but humanity had not. From the ashes of their home, they had lit a fire that now burned in the hearts of 1,000 worlds. More importantly, humanity had begun to see itself not as a species alone, but as part of a broader galactic tapestry. Their resilience was not just for themselves, but a gift to be shared. A new era was dawning, where the lessons of Earth could be the foundation for a future shaped by many hands. In the stars, humanity was no longer a remnant. They were a revelation. The true legacy of humanity, as chronicled in the records of the oldest surviving artificial minds and etched into the databanks of alien historians, was not measured in battles won or systems colonized, but in the irreversible transformation they brought to the galaxy. Humanity's influence radiated beyond the boundaries of their own expansion, seeding change in every civilization they encountered. Species that had remained stagnant for millennia found themselves challenged by human curiosity, boldness, and the relentless drive to improve. Where other races had grown complacent under rigid traditions and glacial technological progress, humans brought chaos, but in that chaos was vitality. Entire systems that had once been locked in diplomatic stasis saw revolutions of thought and governance. Old empires fell, not by invasion, but by the rising tide of ideas, freedom, self-determination, exploration. These were not just ideals humans spoke about, they lived them. In doing so, they inadvertently sparked uprisings, artistic renaissances, scientific revolutions. Some alien governments tried to ban human literature, art, and technology, but it was already too late. The virus of human adaptability and self-belief had already taken root. More than anything, it was humanity's refusal to be defined by their circumstances that made them legendary. They could lose everything and still find meaning. They could be betrayed by allies, devastated by war, or isolated for centuries, and yet emerge stronger. This trait confused and awed alien species who relied on equilibrium and tradition. How could a species thrive in endless instability? But that was the key. Humanity had made instability their foundation. Their entire culture evolved to embrace change, to innovate under pressure, to adapt at any cost. 100 different human societies emerged across the stars, some democratic, others autocratic, some governed by sentient machines or biological consensus, some collectivist, others fiercely individualist. And yet they all shared a common flame, a belief that tomorrow could be better if only they fought for it. That belief became contagious. Alien children grew up reading human stories. Human songs became popular in planets where emotion had once been suppressed for centuries. Even the most conservative civilizations found themselves negotiating with human diplomats, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. Humanity had become too important to ignore. Their technology was erratic, but often brilliant. Their cultural exports seemed strange, yet profoundly moving. The ancient view of humans as primitive remnants of a dead world was replaced with a new truth. Humans were a force of renewal. They were the galaxy's wildfire, destructive, yes, but also cleansing, opening paths that had long been overgrown. And within humanity there came a reckoning. The diaspora looked inward and began to ask what it meant to be human now. Was it genetics, culture, memory? A conference held in the orbital citadel of Arcadia, prime attended by delegates from every major human colony and 100 alien observers, ended with the drafting of the Concord of Ashes and Stars. This document, part philosophical treatise and part diplomatic framework, declared that humanity's identity was rooted in two truths, the ashes of their past and the stars of their future. It committed their kind to a legacy of exploration, mutual uplift, and remembrance. They would never forget Earth, but they would not be bound by it either. As a result, humanity ceased being a story of survival and became a story of influence. Their presence changed not just the physical structures of space, but the spiritual and ideological architecture of galactic civilization. They were no longer the orphans of a dying world. They were architects of a new age. From ashes they had risen, and in the fire of stars they found not just refuge, but purpose. And the galaxy would never be the same again.